Right, welcome everybody to this, our second webinar specifically for our special school and SEND network. Today's webinar will focus on curriculum and will be led by Dr. Penny Barrett, who is the CEO of the Bridge London Trust, which is comprised of 4 schools. Penny has worked in special education for over 30 years and has been a member of many DFE working groups and other initiatives. And today she will draw upon this wealth of experience as she shares of how we might think about our curriculum offer as we welcome more students back to our schools. Many of the students may not have actually been in school since March, so Penny is more than happy to take questions during this webinar, so please do use the chat facility, which is usually located at the bottom of your screen, to pose questions or make comments. At the end of the webinar, Penny is also quite happy for us to have an open discussion, and at which time all your mics will be unmuted. So all that is left for me to do is to say welcome, Penny, and thank you for agreeing to lead today's webinar and to hand over to you. Okay, over to you, Penny.
Thank you very much. Are we going to see the presentation? Okay, so if I just explain a little bit about who I am and my experience and where we're at the moment. And all I'm doing is drawing on the experience of our schools, and I've just been trying to keep abreast of all the things that lots of people are thinking, and I've tried to pull it together so that it makes some sense, but I've also tried to translate it so it makes some sense for special schools, because a lot of the information we've been receiving has been orientated to mainstream schools, and it is quite different in special. So as Pauline said, I'm the CEO of the Bridge London Trust, which is a trust of 4 schools. 3 of those are special schools and 1 of those is a mainstream school. Our 3 special schools have stayed open the whole time with, to start with, quite low numbers, and then increasing and increasing to 1 school now has 70% of its pupils in, and I'll explain how they've managed to do that in a minute. Other schools are getting up to 30 to 40%, and the mainstream school has reopened, that did close to start with. So I have had different experiences with the different schools. All our special schools are all quite different, so they're not generic special schools. 1 school is a school for children with SLD and autism. Another school is a school for children with really, really complex learning needs and behavioural presentation. And that's the school actually we've got the most children in, because basically we have to, because their parents weren't coping with them at home. And then our other special school is a school for children with autism who are fairly high functioning, operating to national curriculum levels, but also often present with some mental health issues as well. So again, a lot of those pupils weren't coping at home, and we're having to increase the numbers of pupils coming in. I sit on the SEND reference group, which is a group rapidly pulled together to advise the DFE on things that are particularly affecting special schools during this lockdown period. And so I'm going to bring some information from that group. I've also just kind of really tried to stay on top of everything by reading everything that's possible as we've gone along. So a lot of the things I'm going to talk about today, I'm just pulling, they aren't my ideas, and please don't kind of say that I've come up with them all. But what I've done is try to pull together things that other people are saying, sometimes think about what they're saying about mainstream, and then think, well, how does that relate to special schools? Okay, can we have the next slide, please? Okay, Pauline gave me these questions when I first agreed to do this, and I'd recently done for the SSAT a session on curriculum and what Ofsted is looking for in the curriculum, because another thing that I do is I am an Ofsted inspector, and I do inspect Section 8 inspections of special schools. I don't do mainstream schools on Section 8. Before lockdown, everybody was talking about the curriculum. Everybody wanted to talk about the 3 I's: intent, implementation and impact, which was driven very much by Ofsted's research and then their subsequent framework. However, it was often misunderstood. When I was doing inspections, people we're often using intent, implementation and impact to talk about individual lessons, and that's not the intention from an Ofsted framework point of view. The whole intention from an Ofsted point of view is to look at this in a big picture way, and that overall, what is the overall intent of your curriculum? How are you going to make sure you put that in place so that the intent actually is carried through? And then what impact does it have? And that's literally what the 3 I's mean. We'll talk more about that because I think time's moved on, and we're not talking about the curriculum that we were delivering prior to lockdown. There will be changes. We'll all be making changes. And what I want to present at the end to you and suggest to you is actually, I think the 3 I's still work, but in a different way. So can we move to the next one, please? Okay. So what, if anything, needs to change in terms of our curriculum model? Whenever people are talking about curriculum at the moment, they're talking about, well, there's a lot of talk about the recovery curriculum. And what seems, although different people are writing about the recovery curriculum, I think it's pretty much credited to Barry Carpenter, as he wrote an article very soon after lockdown started, saying we'll need to recognise the impact this time has on our children and address that. And then other people have taken it on and done it slightly differently. But what generally seems to be meant by the recovery curriculum is a recognition that the kids will have been impacted by what has happened to them in this time. Some will absolutely have sailed through it and it won't have had much of an impact. Others may have massive problems around mental health and anxiety. And sorry, we've lost the screen, but I'm going to my notes. And I think we know, and it's been very openly discussed, but also researched, that this will be the case. Those children, I mean, it's actually being referred to as a trauma, that those children will have faced trauma. And what we know about trauma and anxiety is that if people have faced trauma or anxiety in their lives, then the key things to support them is trust and relationships. That's going to need to be rebuilt. For those, we're going to have a differentiated approach because it will depend on what experiences children have had. But some children will have been very traumatized by this experience, and we need to be able to make sure that we can respond to that. Routines and a sense of belonging are also really important, particularly for children with autism who really rely on routines so much. So what I'm saying is, everybody's been talking about this recovery curriculum, and I've even seen some documents written about recovery curriculum. And my criticism, I guess, at the moment would be, is it seems to be a one-size-fits-all. However, as I was saying earlier, everybody will have experienced this differently. And so what we need to do about it needs to be different for the different children. And if children have had a pretty okay time during this lockdown and have actually quite enjoyed it, then they bounce back into school but pretend like they've not been away, we may not need to do quite as much differently for them as we will for other children. What I think special schools are really, really good at is adjusting and differentiating, and I think that's what we can do. That's what we will be really good at in this situation. So as children return, as increasing children, and also increasing staff. So I'm talking here about children and the curriculum. However, one of the things that's worried me the most about this time is how staff will return, and when staff will return, and what support they will need, and also how staff will relate to each other when you've got some staff who've been in school and some who haven't. And I think all of this is about differentiating and looking at what each individual's needs are, and then looking to address those in whatever way we can. Okay? Next slide, please. Okay, one of the most sensible things I've read about supporting children as they return to school is to think about their return to school as their first day ever at school. And that just seems to make so much sense to me. It won't hurt anybody if we do that, but also we won't miss anybody's needs if we do that. We can over-explain routines, gently build trust and relationships, or rebuild trust and relationships. And it won't actually hurt to do this for those who are attending too, especially if we start this after the summer holidays, because there'll have been a 6-week break anyway, unless people are making summer provision. It will be important to rebuild the relationships and trust with parents too. We're finding in our schools, it's the parents who, to start with, were very mistrustful, were very worried by the whole situation and thought, oh, I've got to keep my child at home. But then they've become, well, basically it's been quite tough at home. So they've asked if children can come back into school, but we've had to very much build the trust with them and rebuild relationships with them and support them to know that what we're doing everything we possibly can to keep the children safe, but also being honest with them, because let's be realistic, social distancing isn't something that happens in most special schools. And I think we can't pretend that it does happen. So we have to say, actually, we can't do that, but this is what we're doing to keep everybody as safe as we possibly can. I think going forward, I mean, I think we'll all be doing this, and you're all probably doing it in your schools at the moment. I think the thing to hang on to is that we need to keep doing this, and we need to keep doing it when we think probably everything's back to normal, for all parents are actually very comfortable with what we're doing. I think we need to then hang on to continuing to do more, over and above, for another term beyond when we think it's actually okay, because parent anxiety will still be there and we need to really address that. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, one of the things that the government, you can ask questions, by the way. I think we didn't really say that, but if you want to ask any questions in the chat, then I can be interrupted and I can try and answer those questions. The other thing we'll do is, if you want to hang on to the questions, we'll try and go to a proper Zoom session at the end so that we can have a proper discussion then. So very happy either way to answer questions at the end or as we're going along. So another thing that's been talked about is, and very clearly the evidence is that COVID-19 doesn't transmit anywhere near as quickly outdoors as indoors. So the obvious thing is to have our learning opportunities outside as much as possible. Now there's all sorts of ways that we can do that. I mean, we already know that many of the soft skills that our children need can be developed outside. Through forest schools, through other activities, but things like resilience, confidence, self-esteem, trust, there can be some amazing work done in outdoor education. We can also use outdoor classrooms if you've got the possibility, or gazebos. We can be creative. So we can take the learning outside as much as possible, but also I think we could be creative with other curriculum areas. There's a lot of science activities that can happen outside. There's so much learning. I mean, if the weather's nice, and I know it's going to be nice next week, but if the weather's nice, we can take just general classroom activities outside if we've got the space to do it. And I think that's a real positive. I think even if the weather's not nice, there's lots of really quality outdoor education experiences that we can do. I'm just going to go to a slight aside. So years ago, we were visiting some friends who lived in Norway. And it was February and it was very, very cold, way, way, way below freezing. Snow on the ground, about 3 foot of snow on the ground. And the child of the family we were visiting went off to his nursery school. And he went off to nursery school, and it was an outdoor nursery school, even though it was way below freezing. And obviously we were surprised, but what was said to us is there's no such thing as bad weather, there's only bad clothing. And I always liked that, and I'm sure other people have heard that before. But actually, we can take learning outside. We can do activities if we just kick the children out properly. And maybe we overprotect them, but we can get a lot of our learning happening outside. We can make it safer from a a transmission point of view, but also probably make it fun to do something a little bit different. Next slide, please. Okay, so what about the students who are not accessing school? So there's the ones that aren't accessing school at the moment are either will be those pupils who are defined as clinically extremely vulnerable and are shielding, or they may have parents who are clinically extremely vulnerable and be shielding, or they may have parents who are really anxious and do not want their child to be in a situation where they perceive their child could bring the virus back to them. And all of those are really valid. So we need to understand that and look to how we can support the families and those situations. Most schools have had to knee-jerk into delivering an online curriculum. Especially after special schools, we would never have thought about doing it the ways we're now doing it before. For many schools, some schools closed, and I think they were at an advantage. Definitely within our trust, the school that closed was definitely at an advantage, because you could then get all your time and energy put on developing your online offer before the school reopened. The schools that stayed open and also tried to develop an online offer at the same time, I think were a little bit on the back foot, but everybody's moved forward enormously. And it's pretty amazing what people have done around the online offers when you see what's out there now. I think special schools have been really creative and done what we usually do and looked at what our children need rather than just putting an offer out there. So I think for some cohorts where there's a similarity of the cohort, so many mainstream schools have been able to put out, so our mainstream school has gone on Google Classrooms and put out the same offer to the year group. You can't do that in a special school. Not every child in a year group, not every child in a class can access the same things. So it's been about developing an online offer that's flexible enough to address the needs of that child at home. I think we also need to recognise that many of our children, when they're at home, go into home mode. And home mode doesn't mean doing any work. So it's actually quite hard to get them to do some work at home. And what we've got to do is also think that many of our children, not many in any of our schools, could actually work independently. They all need to be supported by an adult to achieve some learning. And actually that's then a requirement of parents to support them and a skill up of the parent to support them. So some of the online learning has actually been for adults to teach them how to work with their child. So I think what I'm saying is there's a lot of pressures on receiving learning at home and what that might look like, and we need to be realistic, and the only way to be realistic is to find out what's going on, what parents can deliver, what they are comfortable with delivering, and then providing that support and providing that information. But I've known some parents have complained of feeling overwhelmed and feeling guilty because they can't deliver too much. So I think we need to be talking to them and saying, what can you deliver? Okay, now this is what we're going to give you. And we go for the most important thing, the best thing that we can possibly offer. If a child is only going to get half an hour of input a day, then we give an activity that actually is real quality activity to support the parent and the child to do some learning. Yeah, so all I'm saying is home learning is different for children in special schools. It isn't one size fits all, and it's kind of what we're good at. We're good at differentiating, but we're having to differentiate the home learning as well as differentiating the offer in school. And we really need to think about context, parent support, and the ability of children. Okay. Next slide, please. So where do we go next with the homeschooling offer? I think this is a really difficult one, and I wish I could wave a magic wand and know what was going to happen in September. Are we still going to be on rota systems? Are we going to have everybody back in? Are we still going to be closing the school for 2 weeks every so often when we get a confirmed case? It's all so difficult. So I think we've got to be prepared to do full-time home learning, even if it's for 2 weeks. A blended approach of home learning, where most people think of a blended approach of in school and online, and I'm just going to suggest something slightly different in a minute. Or are they going to be in school full time? The more people I've talked to this week are veering towards thinking that we might be back full time, which I guess at the beginning of this week I wouldn't have even considered. But let's wait and see. I think we've just got to be prepared for everything. The other blended approach I want to suggest is, if we are in a situation where we are still shielding members of our society, whether that be parents or children or people who live in the household, then we could look at a blended approach for those people, which isn't school and online learning, but might be some face-to-face contact at a social distance, of course, and online learning. We might go back to the days of peripatetic teaching, with people going to homes or people taking a child to a local park for a session, and then mixing that with online learning. And that would seem to be a way of preparing the children ready for coming back to school, if that's necessary, and if we're not back full time ourselves. But will it come to this? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't think any of us have the answer to that. Next slide, please. Sorry.
Penny, can I just
Yeah.
interrupt quickly? We just had one question, actually, quite an interesting question from one of the delegates. They're asking if you have any suggestions on how to get feedback from parents about home learning. So basically just really honest feedback from them.
I think it's got to be just communication, and it's thinking about who knows that parent best, and who is that parent most likely to respond to. So not thinking it's got to be the school leader who phones the parent. Is it a teaching assistant that's actually got the best relationship? Do you have a parent support worker that they have disclosed to previously? So really thinking about, well, who's got the best relationship with that parent, that they're most likely to tell the situation as it is, and then try and get that person to talk to them. I think the days of we're in this situation, and we shouldn't be kind of hanging on to hierarchy. We just need to look at personal relationships. I hope that's, and I think there's another chat, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a few more questions actually come in as well. Okay, sorry, it's just some suggestions from other people as well, actually.
Oh, okay, all right.
Some suggestions.
Okay, can we go on, please? Next slide.
Before you go on there, there's one of our, in the chat, Marie says she's got a feedback form that she uses. I wonder if Marie would be prepared to share that with people, so we could put it alongside this webinar for others.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. The other thing, something I think a lot of schools did this, but as we were increasing the numbers coming back, we put out an anonymous questionnaire, which to just get a kind of temperature check on how things were at home. And then we followed that up with a more detailed questionnaire that was specifically focused at individual children. But it was quite good for helping us ask the right questions to get the anonymous one in first. And we did that using something like, it wasn't Google Analytics, but something like that. And that really helped us know what then to be asked, and know what the concerns were that parents had. So then we could kind of tailor the more detailed conversation to that. Okay, so the next thing I was asked to think about was, and again, it is thinking about these children as they return to school and their anxiety levels and their need for self-regulation because of that. So should we still be putting as many demands on the children as they return to school? Well, there's a couple of answers to that, but I mean, the other thing is, another thing we need to be thinking about at this time is things like restraint. And if we're putting a lot of demands on children, it often leads to greater restraint. And I don't think we should be pushing that. we should be avoiding, doing our best to de-escalate and avoid restraint at this time. So a phrase I often use is that this is a dance, and it's a dance that we do amazingly well, that we are very fine-tuned to children, and we know when we can push a little bit and when we give a little bit and when we allow them to self-regulate, because that's what they need. That's the most important thing. So yeah, and I think adults in special schools are amazingly good at this. They know when to just push so that we can move the learning on for an individual and not just allow them to stick in a rut, but also they know when that push is a little bit too far and is actually going to totally push that child out of their comfort zone and they're going to go into meltdown. So I actually think people will get this intuitively well. What we need to do is give them permission to get it to be intuitive and just allow them to do it. We need to say to them, look, we recognize that these children are going to come back and they may be a little bit different. And what we want to do is do that dance, but the proportions of that dance might be slightly different to start with, and then slowly it will change. And I think it's about giving all our staff those permissions. It also links with treating the pupils on their return to school as if it's their first day, because if it was their first day at school, we wouldn't be putting enormous demands on them. So I don't think we should be getting children back in and putting the same demands on them as they did the day they went out. A couple of comments I want to make. One is, I mean, the children will return different. What's been interesting is our mainstream primary school that closed, the children have all returned a little bit larger. They've been sat inside and they haven't done any activity for 6 weeks or 10 weeks. And so a lot of the curriculum is actually going to be around getting outside and running around so that we can try and get them being energetic again. And the other thing I was going to say has popped out of my head, but it will come back in a minute and then I'll say it. So it's just about really, it's, as I've said, it's just about seeing that child as a child, not thinking that they are in the same space as they were when they left school, and then working with them, rebuilding relationships, helping them to feel safe. And so getting that dance right so that they feel safe. So I guess, if you like, the first work to do as we return to school is a preparation to learn, not necessarily diving straight into learning. Okay, and next one, please. This is my last slide and then we can have a conversation. But I'm going back to the intent, implementation and impact. So all I want to say is I quite like the 3 I's. I mean, I don't like the fact that they're driven by Ofsted and everybody feels they've got to do them because of Ofsted, but I actually think they make sense. What I would say is they're still as relevant as they were prior to the pandemic, but they're different. So, as I said, to me, intent is all of these relate to the big picture, but not to me for not for the smaller picture, if you know what I mean. So it's not about an individual lesson, intent, implementation, and impact. It's about what's the entire curriculum. What's our intent of it? Well, that is probably going to change a little bit as children return to school. We are going to be wanting to ensure that they've got resilience and self-confidence, and they're building relationships with people and they've got trust. That's part of your intent. So, but you're still doing your other stuff and might go into the background, or maybe you're not doing your other stuff. You're going to do this first before it comes to it. It will depend on your cohort and what you think is right for your children. But there's still an intent. And there's still a big picture. How are you going to put that into place? What are you going to do about it? Are you going to reorganize your classes, do things different? Maybe you have a curriculum. I don't know, I'm just throwing ideas out. But maybe at the moment, for some secondary special schools may have a curriculum that moves children around, but you actually might decide to start with, you're going to keep children with the same people, paying staff all day. A, because it's from a pod point of view, but B, because from a point of view of relationships and trust. you'll know from your school what you wanting to do. And then also, what impact are you looking for? What, if you're going to do this differently, what is it that you're wanting, what impact are you wanting to have? So if it's about developing resilience and self-confidence, are you actually doing that? How are you going to measure that? That's the biggie. How are you going to know that you've achieved that? So my suggestion is, we've been asked many times during this pandemic to write addendums of policy documents. We've written an addendum of the safeguarding policy, an addendum of the health and safety policy, to say what we'll do different because of the pandemic, and keeping the policy as it is, but actually saying these are the slight changes at the moment. And what I'm suggesting is that we may want to do an addendum to our curriculum offer document, not rewrite it, because we will be going back to that curriculum offer. It might end up tweaked forever slightly, but we will be going back to it. But actually, you might want to write an addendum that thinks about the present situation, what children at present need as they return to school, and what's your intent, implementation and impact for this aspect of the curriculum, and just do it as an addendum. So you don't do anything completely new, but we add something to it. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. So what I suggest now is that people start their videos and we go to a proper Zoom so everybody can see each other, and then we have a question and answer session. I think to manage it, because we've got an awful lot, we've got 101 participants here, so I think to manage it we probably need to use the hands up suggestion to say that you want to speak and then ask a question. So is that all right?
Penny, just before we go to that,
Yeah.
you said you would return to how you've managed to have so many of your students in school.
Oh, yeah, I did say I had to say that, right. So we have a school, as I said before, for children with really, really complex needs, and really challenging behaviour. We've created a day school for children that in the past would have gone to residential provision. So those children are extremely complicated and also quite challenging in the home situation. So when we defined vulnerable as those that are safer in school than they are at home, it pretty much covered that whole cohort, that whole school. There's only 25 children in the school. So we've really tried to think about how we could get them in, because realistically we were heading for care situations unless we could do something. So what we've done is we've worked in partnership with a local adventure playground, which has some indoor provision as well as the adventure playground outside. They are a short breaks provider, and they often provide for our pupils anyway, so they know our children. So we work with the local authority, and the local authority has given us the adventure playground for free, and also given us some of the staff that worked on the adventure playground for free. And then what we've done is split the cohort so that half of them are going to their original school building, and then 2 days a week we have the other half going to this adventure playground. So we're up to about, of the 25, I think we can get 17 in 2 days a week. We're trying to now think about how we get the rest in. But yeah, that's how we've done it. Okay, should we go to Zoom? I mean, a traditional Zoom?
David, can you unmute everybody and put their videos on, please? But whilst we're just doing that, we've got another question, Penny, and it's saying, how are people measuring impact of home learning? We suspect that there are many who do work, but who do not post. So perhaps once everybody's up and running, we can have a discussion around that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from our point of view, I would say that we're not exactly measuring home learning. The only way we're doing it is having conversations with parents. But what I don't want to do is put parents under so much pressure that they feel they've got to do lots and lots of work with their children, when actually they may be working from home. We don't know their situation. So we do what we can.
I'm just looking, do we have anybody with a question?
Hi everyone. Oh, sorry. I just had a thought, Penny, thanks for your presentation. Lots of interesting points there. I'm really interested about the idea of outdoor learning as a kind of a way of getting the kids out using exercise and also as a safety measure. You know, we work in an alternative provision with very limited outdoor space. It's basically all concrete with no playground. And I don't know, I was just sort of trying to think through what that would look like for us. And I don't know if you have heard of how schools are using outdoor learning, or any ideas around that aspect of adapting that part of the curriculum.
I mean, outdoor learning can just be taking what you would have done outside, especially if it's a nice day. So we also, the Bridge Secondary School has no outdoor space on the ground floor, and it has 2 play decks. So outdoor learning is quite difficult, but we can use the car park. We have got a fence that fences off the car park, so you can use the car park, the front. We can just take out some chairs and do some activities outside. It's using local parks, but I know parks have been quite busy. So it is thinking about just thinking outside the box and thinking where you can use, are there safe kind of locked in outside spaces that you can get access to, like adventure playgrounds, where you can close the gate so you're not so worried about absconding or things like that. I know it's difficult, but it's just kind of thinking what's the possibilities, and it will be different for everybody's different contexts, but we can just try our best, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Penny. It'd be interesting to hear if anyone else in the groups has thoughts and ideas about outside learning.
I think somebody called Scotty's got the hand up.
Hi there. Yes, currently at our special school, I take outdoor ed. We're very lucky to live near the beach and the woodland and things like that. But I currently do the RSPB.
Oh dear, you seem to have lost her.
Just at the key moment.
Yes.
That's technology for you. Has anybody else got anything to pick up, or any suggestions to help Adam out with his situation of little outdoor space? Can't see any hands up.
I'll ask a question then. Is anybody else thinking about taking lessons out to children that are in shielding households? Thinking about how they might be able to do that? Or is anybody already doing it? I mean people going out, I don't mean just taking work out or online learning.
Our school is thinking about doing that for some of our very vulnerable students, particularly. It's not in place yet, but it's a tricky one in terms of risk assessments and all those sorts of things. But I like the idea of going to a neutral place like a park or something like that, if that's possible, although it might not be for certain students, obviously.
Yeah,
it's a tricky one of that expectation as a teacher is quite a challenge when everyone's already quite anxious about things. I don't know, to expect a teacher to go into someone's house is quite difficult. I think we'd have to very carefully risk assess and make sure everyone's very comfortable with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you need a lone working policy and all that sort of thing, but they do exist, and you can, social care usually have some good policies that if you can nab and amend rather than start from scratch.
I also think, Penny, there were some schools taking out students, particularly SC students, perhaps two members of staff going out and just literally taking a young person for a walk, which gave the family a little bit of respite and just kept that social contact.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, just getting them, as you say, prepared to come back to school.
Well, as we said, it's about relationships, and if that person can be somebody that they already had a relationship prior to lockdown, then it'd be great to just keep that relationship ready so that it can support the transition back into school.
Yeah. I know in the chat somebody mentioned that they were using evidence for learning. I don't know whether they want to talk a little bit about that. I think it was Emma, how that's going and whether they would recommend something like that for other schools.
Hello, I don't think you can see me. My camera isn't working, but hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, we're using evidence for learning. We've been using it for a little while just to keep parents in contact with school so they know what's going in school. But we've used it really differently since we've closed down, and it's been really, really helpful because we've opened it up so parents have access so they can upload pieces of work that they're doing with children as well, and then the teacher and the parent can then have a two-way conversation on there. So that's been really helpful, especially for helping parents to think about how they deliver stuff. So we've got little example lessons on there as well, so teachers kind of delivering bits of lessons or bits of attention box type stuff or soundboard or resonance board stuff to teddy bears and things like that, just to give parents an idea of how to deliver. And that's been really helpful, I think, and the feedback that we've had from parents has been really good as well, which has given us that engagement. Again, it's not given us any measurement, but it has given us parental engagement, which has been really helpful.
And Penny, do you think parental engagement is something worth measuring at this point, even if you can't measure some of the other things you would like to do, but that idea of engagement?
Yeah, and yeah, that's a really good idea. And it would be quite easy to do with some sort of, I mean, we're all tracking it with some sort of spreadsheets about how often we're talking to parents, but actually, yeah, some sort of qualitative commentary on how well I want to be careful. I want to be careful we don't judge parents for not being able to deliver, especially if they're, for example, working from home or something like that. I don't want us then to be judging them as not delivering just because they can't. So I think, it's just really.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking of it in the judgmental way. I was just thinking of it as, 50% of parents have engaged in a weekly catch-up session or whatever that happens to be.
Another thing we're looking at moving on to, so we've been using Seesaw, but I think different people are using different things, but we're going to try some synchronized sessions so that actually the parents can see the session that's happening in school and the child can sit and almost be part of the session through online learning. I think that's going to be interesting. We haven't done it yet, because I don't know whether anybody's had success with that.
Can't see any hands up, Penny, so perhaps not.
Penny, Scotty's back. I think she might have had one or two technical issues. So maybe, Scotty, if you'd like to finish what you were saying before.
Yes, sorry, super fast broadband not working so well today. But yes, at our school we do RSPB Wild Challenge, which is getting the children to experience nature and help nature. And it's something as simple as just planting a little plant pot and looking after a flower, but or in it's looking out for bugs and just experiencing being outside, listening to the birds and just getting the children outside. But what is good about it is it gives you certain activities that you can do. It's free, and at the end of it they can earn a certificate and they can progress on to bronze, silver and gold, which is a really nice thing that our children really enjoy, and they're so chuffed about what they're doing. And it could be going litter picking and things like that, helping the environment. And we also do the John Muir Award, which is just taking things as slow as you like, and it gives them an accreditation, so they're not just thinking, oh, I'm going outside, they're actually getting something out of it as well. It's nice doing your own certificates and things, but I think it's nice when something comes through the post for them and they've got their name on it and they have achieved it. But it's simple little things, and you can take as long as you like to do it, so it doesn't matter on their level or ability. So I think that's quite a nice thing to do if you haven't got the access or the qualifications to do forest schools.
That's really nice. Another thing our mainstream school is doing is, well, they are redeveloping their curriculum actually as a result of all of this, and they're going to look at project-based learning, but a project that can be, that really thinking about a project that can be delivered outside, and then the curriculum is delivered to that project, but most of it is outside. And I think we'll take some of that learning into our special schools. So, I mean, all I would say, if we're going to kind of finish up here, I think it's been a really, really challenging time, this. We've, everybody, I mean, I think we've now got through crisis management, but everybody is questioning themselves all the time. Have I done the best I could? Am I really doing the best for my pupils and my parents that I could possibly have done? And I would just say to you, you probably have. And actually, if not, it's not perfect, it's okay. You are doing what you can, and you're still making a massive difference to your children. So keep up what you're doing and don't beat yourself up for what you're not doing.
Okay, thanks, Penny. If I could just echo those sentiments, the number of heads I've spoken to are saying, but what if I've missed this, or what if I haven't done that? Stop beating yourselves up, as Penny says. You are doing a fantastic job, and, you know, all credit to yourselves and your staff. So it all really just leaves me now to say thank you very much to Penny for leading today's session. I think it's been very helpful, and I know there's a few things coming through the chat box now, people are agreeing with me. And I love the idea of a dance. And it is, I mean, the children and staff are going to come back with so many different experiences. You can't you can't account for each of them unless you're looking at each young person and each member of staff as an individual. And as Penny says, that's what us in special schools, that's what we've always done, that's what we're good at, so we just have to continue doing that. So certainly look at that and continue what you're doing. Think about how you can use your outdoor spaces, and just that amendment. Not rewriting everything. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, as it were.
Yeah, the addendum, not the rewrite.
And yeah, just yes, exactly. So in addition to saying thank you to Penny, I'd also like to thank to my colleagues, David and EJ and Angelina, who have supported this before, after and during, and to all of you for joining today, because it's been fantastic seeing so many people here, and look forward to seeing you at the next one. It's the same time, same place next week, and we'll be looking at how Thrive can support students' well-being, and it will be led by colleagues at Perseid School. So put it in your diaries, and let's look forward to meeting up next week. And once again, Penny, thank you very, very much for leading today's session. For any of your colleagues who haven't been able to join us today, we will be putting it on our website, and we will be making a link available to you together with Penny's slides, and Emma has already sent me through the form that she uses. So thanks very much, and see you all hopefully next week. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.